The harbor was shrouded in a heavy pre-dawn mist, the kind that made the massive gray hull of the USS Independence seem like a ghost emerging from the water. The fog clung to the deck, curling around the towering mast and radar antennas like fingers trying to hold something back. The chill of early December bit at the skin of anyone daring enough to set foot on the pier. Seagulls cried out, cutting through the thick silence, their calls oddly sharp against the gentle slap of waves against the hull. Chief Petty Officer Tom Hawk Harlan strode across the wet pier, boots striking the wooden planks with a rhythm as certain as a heartbeat. His jacket was heavy with rain, sleeves damp, collar turned up against the cold, but it didn't slow him. Every step he took carried the weight of decades of service, battles fought in waters that would make most men tremble, and missions that still haunted the minds of those who survived. He moved with the certainty of a man who had faced death and returned, not just returned, but stood taller, wiser, sharper. Hawk paused at the foot of the gangway, peering up at the massive vessel. He could almost feel the hum of life inside her hull, the thrum of engines, the whisper of turbines, the smell of diesel and metal, and 1,000 untold secrets. He'd been recalled for this mission, but the sudden blockade in front of him made his pulse quicken. Standing there, rigid and unwavering, was a young Navy lieutenant, barely more than a year or two into his career. He was tall, neatly pressed uniform, crisp cap casting a shadow over his eyes. His posture was military perfect, his expression unreadable, but Hawk could feel the barrier of authority radiating from him. "Chief Harlan," the lieutenant said, voice calm but firm, carrying over the mist. "You're not boarding. Orders are clear. You'll have to wait." Hawk's eyebrows shot up. His eyes narrowed, scanning the lieutenant as though sizing him up, calculating. The crew moving along the deck froze for a moment, sensing the tension that crackled in the humid air. Some whispered among themselves, others stopped entirely, uncertainty etched across their faces. "Excuse me," Hawk's voice was low but sharp, like a hawk's talon scraping metal. "You're telling me I'm not allowed on my own ship?" The lieutenant's jaw tightened. "Sir, I'm just enforcing orders. You'll have to step back." Hawk's hand instinctively brushed against the railing of the gangway. His body tensed, not with anger, not yet, but with a surge of disbelief. He had faced enemy fire, storms that threatened to swallow his vessel, nights when every breath was a gamble. And now, a kid in a uniform was standing in his way like he had the right to stop a decorated sailor from doing what he was called to do. "Lieutenant," Hawk said slowly, each word deliberate, "I've led men through firestorms. I've guided ships through waters where the only thing standing between life and death was my call. Do you have any idea who I am?" The lieutenant didn't flinch. "I know your record, I know your accolades, but the orders are clear." A murmur ran through the gathering crew. They knew Hawk. Everyone did. Some had heard the stories whispered in mess halls, passed from sailor to sailor like sacred lore. The time he navigated a ship through a storm so fierce it bent radar arrays like twigs, the mission where he led a rescue team under gunfire to save a stranded squad of Marines, the nights in hostile waters when every man on deck relied on his instinct to survive. Hawk wasn't just a veteran, he was a living legend, and yet here he was, stopped by a lieutenant barely out of training. Hawk exhaled slowly, fog escaping from his lips like smoke. His mind ran through the possibilities, his military instincts calculating the situation. There were rules, yes, and chains of command, but there were also threats he couldn't see, orders he hadn't been briefed on. Still, the suddenness of the blockade pricked a sharp edge of suspicion. Who had issued these orders? Why now, when the ship needed every experienced hand? "Lieutenant," Hawk said, voice dropping into a low growl, "you need to understand one thing. I am not just a sailor. I am the man whose life experience you are underestimating. And I assure you, you do not want to stand between me and this mission." The lieutenant's fingers twitched near his sidearm, not aggressive but ready. Hawk noticed, his eyes narrowing. He had no intention of escalating. He wasn't here for a fight, but his gut told him something was wrong. Too wrong. Something in the way the lieutenant's eyes flickered, The way his stance was rigid, defensive, it was more than protocol. Hawk took another step forward, boots splashing slightly on the wet deck. You don't know what's coming, and I'm telling you this ship, this mission, lives or dies on whether I'm aboard. The lieutenant swallowed hard. The crowd of sailors shifted nervously. Some muttered under their breath. One whispered, "Is this really happening?" Another muttered, "Chief Harlan blocked." Hawk's gaze swept the pier, the dock, the water beyond. Somewhere in the harbor, the bell of a ship tolled, a deep, resonant sound that seemed to vibrate in his chest. It was almost ceremonial, almost like a warning, and Hawk felt a shiver crawl up his spine. He knew what it meant. Whatever was coming, it was urgent, and the wrong delay could be catastrophic. Then from the far end of the dock, a figure appeared, a shadow moving with purpose through the fog. Boots striking the pier with authority, metals glinting faintly, hat low against the early sun. The Admiral, Admiral Leland, a man whose reputation for decisiveness was legendary, whose judgment had saved countless lives in circumstances that would have shattered lesser men. The lieutenant stiffened. Hawk felt a pulse of relief and renewed tension simultaneously. Relief because the Admiral's presence always meant order, clarity. Tension because, with the Admiral, things were never ordinary. His eyes locked on Hawk with a piercing calm that spoke volumes. "Lieutenant," the Admiral called, his voice cutting through the mist like a knife, "stand down." The lieutenant's jaw tightened visibly. For a brief moment, Hawk saw uncertainty flicker in the young man's eyes, a human crack in a wall of discipline. Hawk exhaled slowly, letting a fraction of the tension drain from his shoulders. But his gut told him the situation was far from resolved. He could see the weight behind the Admiral's stride, the intention in every step. This recall wasn't routine. There was urgency. There was danger. And someone somewhere had tried to prevent him from boarding for a reason he was only beginning to suspect. Hawk's hand rested on the gangway railing, knuckles white. The mist swirled around him, a soft curtain hiding secrets in its folds. Every sailor on deck held their breath. The fog seemed almost alive, pressing against the hull, whispering that the calm was temporary, that something was coming that would change everything. And then, as if on cue, the first faint warning of the mission's true peril appeared on the horizon, a distant silhouette moving against the gray dawn, barely visible but unmistakable. Hawk's eyes narrowed, instincts flaring. Whatever had been waiting, whatever threat lurked in the water, it had already begun to arrive. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The sailors watching knew enough. When Hawk's eyes fixed, steady and unblinking, something significant was about to happen, and the fog, heavy and suffocating, seemed to hold its breath with them. The tension was palpable. Every second stretched, heavy with anticipation. Hawk knew that the next choice, the next step, would set the course of events that no drill, no order, and no regulation could have prepared them for. And just as he lifted his foot onto the gangway, the fog shifted again, revealing a flicker of movement from the water, a shadow too fast, too deliberate to be ordinary. Hawk froze mid-step, heart hammering, knowing instinctively that the real challenge had begun even before he had crossed the threshold of the USS Independence. The fog hung heavy over the pier, pressing down on Hawk's shoulders as he stopped mid-step on the gangway. The USS Independence loomed above him, every steel plate gleaming wet and gray in the muted dawn. The lieutenant remained rooted in place, a human barrier between the ship and the man who had commanded it before anyone on deck was even born. Hawk's gaze locked on the lieutenant. "Orders?" he asked, voice low but sharp like a whip cracking through the mist. "Tell me, Lieutenant, what orders are more important than a life-saving mission?" The lieutenant swallowed. His hands flexed at his sides, fingers brushing the seams of his uniform. "Chief Harlan, I'm just doing what I'm told. I don't make the rules." Hawk's eyes flicked toward the gathering crew. Sailors clustered along the pier and deck, whispers floating through the fog like dry leaves caught in a wind tunnel. "They're blocking Hawk," one murmured. "No way, he's the man who—" Hawk cut them off with a sharp look, but the whispers only grew louder. Everyone on that pier had heard stories, tales of rescues in hostile waters, nights that should have ended in disaster but didn't, thanks to Hawk's instincts. They knew he wasn't just a veteran, he was a legend. And yet here he was, stopped cold by a lieutenant who hadn't earned half the respect Hawk commanded just by walking onto the deck. "Lieutenant," Hawk continued, voice calm now, but every word carrying weight, "I've faced storms that would have sunk this ship twice over. I've led men through enemy fire when every option seemed impossible. And now you're telling me I don't get on board." The lieutenant's jaw tightened, and for a moment his hands shook slightly. Hawk noticed. It wasn't fear, it was doubt. Doubt in the orders, doubt in the man standing in front of him. "Sir, I—" "Lieutenant," Hawk interrupted, stepping closer, boots splashing in shallow puddles on the pier. "You don't understand. I'm not here to argue about rank or protocol. I'm here because this mission demands me. Every second you waste, every hesitation could cost lives. And if you want to stop me, well, you're going to regret it." The lieutenant's eyes flickered to the Admiral, who was now approaching at a measured pace, his polished boots silent against the wet pier. The crowd of sailors shifted instinctively, straightening, snapping to attention. They recognized the presence before Hawk did. The man who had saved entire fleets through strategy and experience, the man whose decisions could turn the tide of war before it even started. The Admiral stopped a few steps away from Hawk, his gaze sweeping the crowd before settling on the confrontation at the gangway. Every muscle in his body was tight, precise, commanding. But there was something under the surface that Hawk recognized immediately. Urgency, a silent alarm that told him this recall was far from routine. "Lieutenant," the Admiral said, voice cutting through the fog like steel on steel, "step aside." The lieutenant's hands trembled slightly. "Sir, orders are being amended," the Admiral said sharply. Hawk nodded almost imperceptibly, a rush of relief coursing through him. But it was tempered by instinct. His gut told him something was wrong, too wrong. Hawk's eyes narrowed as he glanced back at the fog-shrouded water. Something was out there, something he couldn't yet identify. But the delay, the lieutenant, the secretive amendment, all of it added up. Someone had tried to keep him off the ship. Someone had a reason, and it wasn't to protect him. Hawk finally stepped forward, boots hitting the gangway with purpose. Every movement was deliberate, controlled, but there was a coiled tension in his shoulders. He could feel the eyes of the crew on him, the unspoken respect and awe. Whispers flitted like shadows along the deck. "Hawk's back, finally. He's the man you don't stop." The lieutenant stepped back, jaw tight, but his eyes remained fixed on Hawk. There was respect there now, mixed with unease. Hawk could see it, the realization that rank and orders meant nothing if you didn't understand the man you were trying to block. The Admiral's eyes softened slightly as he looked at Hawk. "We need you," he said, voice low but deliberate. "This mission, it's not routine. There are threats you haven't been briefed on yet. And the last time we dealt with them, we lost good men. I need you on that deck, Chief. No one else can handle this." Hawk nodded slowly, understanding the gravity behind the words. He had faced impossible missions before, but something in the Admiral's tone told him this was different. High stakes, lives on the line, danger hiding just beyond the horizon. "Understood, sir," Hawk said, voice steady even as adrenaline surged. "I'm on board." The lieutenant gave a stiff nod, a mix of resignation and respect. He had witnessed legends before, but rarely had one walked onto a pier like this, commanding presence without a word. Hawk's mere existence had rewritten the rules for anyone foolish enough to think protocol could contain him. The Admiral turned, addressing the crew. "Get ready, Harlan's on board. This isn't just a patrol. This is a mission that requires every ounce of skill and focus you have. Pay attention, move fast, trust him. Lives depend on it." The crew snapped to action, but Hawk's gaze remained fixed on the foggy horizon. His instincts screamed something was already moving out there. Shadows under the water, echoes on the radar that didn't fit any standard pattern. This wasn't going to be simple. It never was when he was called back for something urgent. Then came the first real sign of danger, a faint movement through the mist, distant, almost imperceptible. A vessel or several cutting through the waves at unnatural speed. Hawk squinted, muscles coiling. His years of experience told him what he was seeing, not ordinary craft, not friendly, something else, something that demanded his attention immediately. "Lieutenant," Hawk said, voice low but carrying over the deck, "keep an eye on the starboard radar. Call me every blip that moves faster than a routine patrol, and don't second-guess it. If it's moving strange, it's hostile." The lieutenant's face paled slightly. "Yes, sir." Hawk didn't look away from the horizon. He had faced ambushes before, storms before, enemies that should have destroyed him. But this felt like a trap laid specifically to test him. And worse, someone had tried to keep him off the ship for a reason he hadn't uncovered yet. The wind picked up, carrying a sharp tang of salt and diesel. Fog swirled in patterns that made the shadows on the water appear alive. Hawk felt a familiar tightening in his chest, the prelude to danger he had learned to trust. He was ready, always ready, but the thought gnawed at him. Why now? Why block him? And most importantly, who knew what he could do that others wanted to prevent? The Admiral's voice came again, firm, cutting through the tension. "All units, prepare for immediate deployment. Harlan is in command of the forward operations team." Hawk's eyes flicked toward the crew. Confidence surged as the sailors fell into their roles, but the shadow on the horizon remained. The fog seemed almost alive now, curling around the deck, around Hawk, around every anxious heartbeat. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every mission, every man lost, every life he had ever been responsible for. And he knew one thing with certainty: whatever was coming, he would face it head-on. The question was, would the crew and the lieutenant be ready to survive what was about to strike? A distant horn sounded, a low warning note that vibrated through the hull and pier alike. Hawk's pulse quickened. Something was coming, something faster, smarter, more dangerous than any patrol exercise. And for the first time since he stepped onto the pier, Hawk felt the unmistakable stirrings of a storm that would not just test his skill, but the very limits of the USS Independence and everyone aboard. And in that moment, the lieutenant, standing behind him, realized the truth. The man they tried to block was not just a sailor. He was the only one who could save them all. The fog thickened, the water churned, and from somewhere unseen, a faint, almost imperceptible vibration traveled through the hull, foreboding urgent. Hawk's hand tightened on the railing. He could feel it in his bones. The real test hadn't begun yet. The fog swirled thickly over the deck of the USS Independence, curling like fingers that wanted to pull the ship and its crew into the unknown. Hawk's boots struck the steel with authority, each step sending a vibration up his spine. His eyes never left the distant horizon, where shadows seemed to shift unnaturally, bending the morning light into strange, fleeting shapes. Every seasoned sailor on deck could sense it. Something was wrong. The lieutenant hovered behind Hawk, his crisp uniform slightly damp from the mist. He had expected orders to be simple, the mission routine. Instead, he was trapped in a moment of history, standing just behind the man whose reputation alone could command a fleet. Hawk's presence was electric. It carried authority, experience, and danger, all in one measured stride. Admiral Leland approached with deliberate pace. Each step seemed to echo in the heavy silence. His medals glinted faintly in the pale light, a constellation of achievement. The sailors snapped to attention automatically. The lieutenant stiffened, but Hawk only gave a slight nod of recognition. He had served under the Admiral before, enough times to know when something was beyond routine. And this recall, this sudden blocking and then summoning, it screamed of urgency. "Harlan," the Admiral said, voice steady but edged with steel. "We're not just patrolling the usual sector. There's activity in the northern corridor, an unidentified fleet moving fast, with technology that isn't standard. Intelligence flagged it hours ago, but by the time I mobilized the Independence, you were delayed." Hawk's jaw tightened. Delayed? By whom? His voice was calm, but the question carried weight. Not just any officer could stop him, not on this pier, not in his element. And yet someone had. Someone had wanted him off this ship, and now the Admiral was hinting there was more to it than procedure. Internal security flagged your presence as potentially problematic, the Admiral said, carefully choosing his words. We suspect someone may have tried to prevent you from boarding, possibly to compromise the mission. That's why the lieutenant stopped you. Hawk's eyes narrowed. Someone tried to block me on purpose. His voice dropped to a low growl. Do you know who? The Admiral shook his head. Not yet, but you'll need to be ready for anything. The northern corridor is dangerous and the vessels we've tracked are highly coordinated. Standard protocols won't suffice. We need experience, intuition, and leadership on the deck. That's why you were recalled, Hawk. You're the only one I trust with this. Hawk took a slow breath. The fog, thick and suffocating, seemed to mirror the weight of the mission. He thought of every man he had lost, every team he had led, every night when instinct and experience were the only things keeping them alive. And he knew immediately, this was no ordinary patrol. This was a mission that would push the limits of the Independence and its crew, and they didn't even know the half of it yet. The lieutenant, still behind Hawk, swallowed hard. His eyes darted between Hawk and the Admiral, struggling to reconcile the rigid rules he had followed with the reality of the man before him. Hawk wasn't just a veteran. He was a living strategy, a force that even seasoned officers instinctively deferred to when survival hung in the balance. The lieutenant's respect was growing, mingled with the creeping fear that they were all about to walk into something far bigger than anyone had anticipated. Admiral Leland continued, voice low so only Hawk and the lieutenant could hear. We intercepted encrypted communications that suggest hostile vessels are moving towards civilian shipping lanes. If we're not careful, there will be casualties. High-value targets are at risk. You'll need to coordinate the forward operations team, assess every incoming threat, and make split-second decisions. Hawk nodded, jaw tight. Understood. Forward ops, visual and radar scans, coordinate defensive measures, and preemptively maneuver before the threat closes. Standard procedure with adjustments for high-speed, high-risk interception. His mind was already calculating. Engine speed, wind resistance, radar blind spots, crew positioning. Every detail mattered. The Admiral's gaze lingered on Hawk, measuring. There's more, he added, lowering his voice further. Some of the vessels are equipped with experimental tech, unknown propulsion systems. Our intelligence team has flagged them as highly advanced. This is not just a threat, it's a test of every capability we have. And they've already tried to slow you down. That's why you were blocked. Hawk's eyes narrowed and his fingers tightened around the railing. Experimental tech, they knew I'd be a problem, someone is setting a trap. He let the words hang in the fog, knowing the sailors couldn't hear the subtle shift in tension, but feeling it deep in his bones. The Admiral nodded slightly. Exactly, and we can't predict everything. That's why I need you on deck, Hawk. You see what others can't. You react where others hesitate. You're our advantage. Hawk turned his gaze back to the lieutenant. Do you understand what's happening now? He asked quietly, tone firm but not angry. This isn't about protocol anymore. This is about survival. Every second we hesitate could cost lives. And someone tried to keep me from boarding, probably hoping to sabotage the mission before it began. The lieutenant's eyes widened. Sir, I didn't know. You didn't know, Hawk said, voice softer now but laced with steel, and that's okay. But now you do, and you follow my lead. No hesitation, no assumptions. Move as I move, think as I think. Survival depends on it. A horn sounded in the distance, low and resonant, cutting through the mist like a warning shot. Hawk's gaze flicked to the radar, tracking the movement in the northern corridor. The shadowy shapes had grown larger, faster. His instincts flared. Adrenaline surged. This was no routine encounter. The fog on the water seemed to pulse with tension, mirroring the fear and anticipation that gripped everyone on deck. The Admiral's hand rested briefly on Hawk's shoulder. "I've got faith in you," he said quietly, "and now we wait for you to make your mark." Hawk's eyes flicked back to the shadowy horizon. His mind raced. Navigation, speed, defense, attack vectors, crew coordination, the unknown tech at every factor was critical. And as the fog thickened around the USS Independence, he knew one thing with certainty. Someone had underestimated him. Someone had tried to block a man whose instinct was survival, and they were about to regret it. The lieutenant, finally absorbing the weight of the situation, straightened his posture. Respect had turned to urgency. "Sir, what's our first move?" Hawk's gaze never wavered from the horizon. "We take control," he said, voice low but commanding. "We identify, intercept, neutralize, and no matter what comes, we don't falter. Understand?" "Yes, sir," the lieutenant replied, determination finally breaking through his anxiety. The fog shifted again, and in that instant, a faint vibration passed through the hull, a subtle, almost imperceptible tremor. Hawk's pulse quickened. It was a signal he had learned to recognize long ago. The enemy was moving closer, faster than intelligence had predicted. And whatever they weren't playing by any rules the Independence had trained for. Hawk clenched his fists around the railing. He had faced ambushes, storms, enemies that should have destroyed him, but this was different. This was deliberate, strategic, and personal. Someone wanted to test him, and now, finally, he could see the game unfolding. Admiral Leland's eyes flicked toward the shadows on the water. "Keep your eyes sharp," he said. "We don't know what's coming." Hawk nodded slowly, heart hammering. Every instinct screamed, "Prepare, move, anticipate." And with the crew rallying behind him, the lieutenant finally understanding the stakes, and the fog concealing unseen threats, Hawk knew that the USS Independence was about to face a test unlike any other in its storied history. The mist thickened, the water churned, and somewhere just beyond visibility, the first real sign of danger, shapes moving too fast, angles impossible, revealed that the calm had been an illusion. Hawk tightened his jaw. He was ready, but were they? The Admiral's gaze met his one last time. No words were needed. Both knew the coming hours would decide everything. The ship, the crew, the mission, and perhaps even the lives of those who had tried to keep him off the deck. And as the first faint silhouette emerged through the fog, Hawk felt the familiar rush, the prelude to a storm that was just beginning. The USS Independence creaked as it began to move, slicing through the thick morning fog like a blade through silk. Hawk's boots pounded against the deck as he moved toward the command center, every step purposeful, every nerve taut. The crew followed him instinctively. They didn't need orders to know he was in charge. They had sailed with him before, or at least heard the stories, and the energy he carried now was magnetic, urgent, unavoidable. The lieutenant trailed just behind, still tense but trying to absorb Hawk's aura of authority. He had never witnessed leadership like this in the field, not from instructors, not from seasoned officers. Hawk didn't bark orders. He radiated command. Every sailor responded instinctively, positioning themselves, checking systems, scanning the horizon. Inside the command center, the Admiral stood beside the main radar console, reviewing the incoming data. The room smelled of electronics, coffee, and recycled air, mixed with the underlying tang of anxiety. Multiple screens flickered with blips and shadows, some patterns too fast, too erratic to be routine. Hawk stepped in, eyes immediately scanning the readouts. "Status report," he demanded, tone sharp but controlled. "Multiple unidentified vessels approaching," replied the communications officer, voice tight. "Not responding to hails. Speed and formation suggest coordinated movement, unknown propulsion systems. They're closing in on civilian shipping lanes." Hawk's jaw tightened. "Angles." "Intercept course is unpredictable," said the radar tech. "We can't plot their trajectory accurately. They adjust constantly." Hawk's mind raced, breaking down the problem step by step. Enemy vectors, ship speed, wind currents, radar interference. Every possibility, every margin of error, Every second counted. He tapped commands into the central console, coordinating defensive systems with a precision that came from decades of experience. The lieutenant watched him, all growing with every flick of Hawk's fingers, every command issued. "Sir, how do you?" "Experience," Hawk said sharply, eyes still on the radar. "Not luck, not training manuals, experience." The Admiral's eyes met Hawk's briefly. "We've already lost a fleet to these vessels. Your presence here is the only reason we have a chance." Hawk's teeth clenched. The weight of responsibility pressed against him like the ocean itself. He could feel the tension in the air, thick enough to taste, but there was no time to hesitate. Each moment brought the unknown fleet closer, faster, closer than any protocol could safely allow. The crew moved with synchronized precision under Hawk's direction. Missiles were armed, navigation adjusted, radar recalibrated. The lieutenant relayed Hawk's orders to the forward deck team, absorbing the cadence and urgency of his commands. He realized now that blocking Hawk earlier had been a mistake, but more than that, it could have been fatal if they had delayed any longer. Suddenly, a flicker on the radar caught Hawk's eye. One of the unidentified vessels had broken formation, moving erratically. Hawk leaned forward, scanning the visual monitors. The fog on the water made it almost invisible to the naked eye, but his instincts didn't need confirmation. "They're testing us," Hawk muttered under his breath, "checking our reaction time, probing defenses." The lieutenant's voice trembled slightly. "Sir, should we engage?" Hawk didn't answer immediately. Every second counted. He calculated the angles, the speed, the trajectories in his mind faster than any machine could. Then he made the call. "Hold, wait for the next maneuver. We act together, coordinated, no rash moves. Forward deck, lock visual on target Delta 3. Don't take your eyes off it." A low hum vibrated through the hull, almost imperceptible, but enough to make Hawk pause. It was a subtle energy, unlike anything the ship had encountered before. His hand instinctively moved toward the rail as if bracing for impact. "Chief," said the Admiral quietly, "we've never seen anything like this. Are you sure we're ready?" Hawk's gaze didn't waver from the radar. "We don't get ready, we respond, and we survive." The fog thickened outside, shadows twisting unnaturally across the water's surface. The lieutenant followed Hawk's instructions, relaying commands to the forward deck and coordinating with engineering to maintain optimal speed and maneuvering angles. The crew's anxiety was palpable, but Hawk's presence anchored them. Then, as if on cue, a sudden movement streaked across the water, fast, too fast for standard vessels. Missiles or torpedoes. Hawk didn't have time to confirm. "Evasive, starboard thrusters full now," he barked. The deck groaned under the strain as the ship responded. The lieutenant's eyes widened. "Sir, that came out of nowhere." Hawk's jaw set. "Nothing comes out of nowhere. They're hiding their approach, testing us. Keep eyes sharp, anticipate." The crew executed every command with precision, adrenaline surging, muscles straining against the motion of the ship. The Independence rolled slightly as the starboard thrusters pushed hard against the waves. Missiles streaked past the fog, disappearing into gray mist. The crew on deck ducked instinctively, shields ready, nerves taut. Hawk's mind raced. He had seen this before, not the tech, not the speed, but the pattern, deliberate testing, calculated intimidation. He felt a grim satisfaction. They had underestimated him. That delay, that attempt to block him, would now cost the enemy dearly. A sudden alert flashed on the radar, a new contact. "Multiple vessels approaching from aft," shouted a technician. "Too fast for standard detection." Hawk's eyes narrowed. He leaned over the console, inputting a series of maneuvers, anticipating trajectories. "Engage countermeasures. Full alert, defensive systems online. Forward deck, prepare intercept." The lieutenant relayed the commands with precision, heart racing. He glanced at Hawk, seeing a calm focus that belied the storm of activity surrounding them. The Admiral, standing nearby, allowed a rare look of trust to pass between them. Hawk was in control, and everyone aboard instinctively understood it. Then came the first true confirmation of danger. A missile streaked out of the fog, heading straight for the Independence. Hawk's hand flew over the controls, initiating evasive maneuvers, while the lieutenant coordinated defensive fire. The crew held their breath, waiting for the inevitable explosion. And then nothing. The missile veered slightly, detonating harmlessly in the mist. Hawk exhaled, but only slightly. The threat wasn't neutralized. It had been testing their reflexes, their coordination, their resolve. "They're probing," Hawk muttered. "They're looking for weaknesses, don't give them one." Another blip appeared on the radar, moving with unpredictable velocity. Hawk recognized the signature immediately. Advanced propulsion, probably experimental. "Prepare for intercept," he said, voice calm but forceful. "We're going to engage on our terms." The fog swirled around the Independence, thick and suffocating. Shadows moved faster than the eye could track. The crew worked in perfect synchrony under Hawk's command. And yet, somewhere in the back of his mind, Hawk knew that the real danger, the one behind the attempt to block him from boarding, was still unseen, waiting for the perfect moment. The lieutenant, finally comprehending the full magnitude of Hawk's presence, whispered to himself, "So that's why they tried to stop him." Hawk didn't hear it. His eyes were fixed on the horizon, mind racing, instincts sharp, every muscle coiled and ready. The fog pressed in, the water churned violently around the ship, and somewhere in the shadows the first true strike was forming. Hawk's hand gripped the railing tightly. "Brace yourselves," he warned, voice carrying across the deck. "This isn't over, not by a long shot." And for the first time since the mission began, the crew understood exactly what was coming. Something deadly, something fast, something designed to test the limits of the USS Independence and every life aboard. The fog seemed to pulse, the shadows thickened, and Hawk's eyes never left the approaching threat. The storm had truly begun. The USS Independence groaned as the engines roared, slicing through the fog-choked water. The mist clung to the hull like a living thing, curling around the deck, muffling the creak of steel and the shouted orders of the crew. Hawk moved with precision, each step measured, boots slapping against the wet surface as he surveyed his sailors. Every eye followed him, every heartbeat synchronized with his own. They had been through drills, sure, but nothing prepared them for what hovered unseen beyond the gray horizon. "Forward deck, ready intercept teams," Hawk barked, voice carrying over the chaos. The sailors snapped into action, securing weapons, checking targeting systems, scanning the horizon. The lieutenant, still close behind Hawk, relayed orders with a mix of urgency and disbelief. He had followed orders in simulators, in training, in theory. But this was different. This was the real thing. Unknown vessels, unknown technology, and lives hanging by the thinnest of threads. Hawk's eyes scanned the radar screens inside the command center. Blips moved too fast, too erratically. Shadows in the water flitted in ways that defied conventional movement. These were not ordinary craft. The energy signatures alone suggested experimental propulsion, untested systems. Hawk's gut tightened. "Brace for evasive maneuvers. Starboard thrusters full," he commanded, hands flying across the controls with precision. The lieutenant relayed the order, voice barely keeping pace with Hawk's rapid-fire instructions. Crew members adjusted, holding their positions while turbines hummed and the Independence shifted its weight in the churning sea. A missile streaked from the fog straight for the hull. Hawk's reflexes kicked in, faster than thought, faster than calculation. Evasive starboard now. The ship tilted violently, water spraying across the deck. The missile detonated harmlessly in the fog behind them. Hawk exhaled slowly, but the calm lasted only a heartbeat. Another blip appeared, smaller, faster, moving in a pattern too deliberate to be random. Hawk recognized it immediately. A scout craft designed to test defenses. "They're probing," he muttered, voice low but audible. "They want to see what we'll do." The lieutenant's eyes widened. "Sir, we can't let them." "They won't get the chance," Hawk snapped. His tone brooked no argument. "Forward deck, lock on target Delta 3, prepare intercept missiles. Engineer, maintain speed at max safe capacity. Timing is everything." Crew members moved as one, a well-oiled machine under Hawk's command. The fog twisted, shadows danced, and the unknown vessels continued to close in, unpredictable, almost teasing. The water churned violently, reflecting the pale light of the rising sun. Hawk's pulse surged, but his expression remained calm, unyielding. Then came the first strike. A volley of torpedoes erupted from the mist, slicing through the water toward the Independence. The deck crew braced, shields up, weapons aimed. Hawk's hand flew over the control panel, adjusting angles, firing countermeasures, calculating the trajectory of each incoming threat with near-impossible speed. The torpedoes detonated in the water behind them, but the second wave followed immediately. Hawk barked another order. "Divert thrusters. Evasive starboard. Forward deck, lock Delta 4. The lieutenant's voice trembled slightly, relaying the commands, coordinating teams with growing respect for Hawk's precision. "Sir, how are you calculating all of this at once?" Hawk didn't answer. He didn't have time. Every second counted. Every fraction of delay could mean disaster. Missiles streaked across the fog, detonations splashed violently, and the water churned like a living beast. The crew held their ground, fear present but tempered by trust in Hawk. Suddenly, a flash of light illuminated the water ahead. A vessel cloaked in mist, moving faster than any technology the Independence had encountered. Hawk recognized the pattern. Advanced propulsion, precise vector adjustments, a scout-turned-hunter. "Target Delta 5, Hawk said, calm but commanding. "Forward deck intercept, fire on my mark." A series of coordinated movements followed, missiles arcing through the mist, engines straining. The lieutenant's hands were shaking now, but he relayed every command flawlessly. Crew members ducked, shields braced, adrenaline surging. The vessel veered suddenly, testing their defenses, but Hawk anticipated it, his calculations precise. "Hold formation, don't break," Hawk barked. "Engineer, maintain thrust. Forward deck, prepare Delta 6. The water erupted in a series of explosions as intercepts collided with incoming projectiles. The fog seemed almost alive, curling around the ship, hiding dangers, amplifying every sense. Hawk's eyes scanned, hands never stopping, mind racing. He felt the pressure, the stakes, the lives in the balance. Another missile streaked out of the fog, aimed directly at the Independence's bridge. Hawk reacted instinctively, twisting controls, firing defensive flares. The missile detonated mid-air, sparks cascading like fireworks in the mist. The lieutenant gasped, realizing the margin for error was almost non-existent. "They're testing us," Hawk said almost to himself, "finding weaknesses, seeing if we can survive their patterns." Suddenly the fog parted slightly, revealing more than the crew expected. A fleet of unknown vessels, sleek, fast, and seemingly indestructible, was moving in formation. Hawk's jaw tightened. "All teams, defensive posture. Do not underestimate them. Keep communication tight, eyes open. We engage on my signal." The lieutenant's hand shook slightly on the radio. "Sir, that's impossible speed. How do we?" Hawk didn't answer. He didn't need to. He was already calculating trajectories, weapon placements, angles, defensive maneuvers, speed adjustments, all in his mind simultaneously. His instincts, honed over decades, guided every movement. The crew followed, trusting him blindly because they knew the man was their only chance. The first clash was inevitable. Missiles arced, engines roared, water exploded violently around the hull. The Independence shuddered under the strain, but Hawk's coordination kept them steady. Crew members ducked, braced, fired, recalculated. Every second was a test of skill, nerve, and trust. Then came the unmistakable signal, a faster, smarter vessel breaking formation moving directly toward the Independence. Hawk's eyes narrowed. Prepare for intercept Delta 7. Forward deck, fire on my mark. Lieutenant, coordinate defense layers. The lieutenant's voice came, steady now despite the tension. Aye, sir. Forward deck ready, shields up. Hawk's hands moved over the controls, executing evasive maneuvers while simultaneously coordinating missile defense. The vessel veered, fired, tested them, but Hawk anticipated, countered, survived. The Independence responded like a living entity, every crew member moving as part of a single, calculated machine. A sudden explosion rocked the water on starboard, splashing across the deck. Crew members ducked instinctively. Hawk's jaw tightened. That's not enough. Push forward, keep angles tight, don't let them predict our moves. The lieutenant glanced at Hawk, awe and fear mixing in his eyes. Sir, I've never seen anyone coordinate like this. Hawk didn't respond. His gaze was fixed on the horizon, on the shadows emerging from the fog, on the challenge that had been laid for him. The attempt to block him from boarding had been a warning, an obstacle, yes, but also an underestimation. And Hawk thrived on being underestimated. He barked orders, fire and movement, defensive protocols and tactical maneuvers, every command precise, measured, relentless. Explosions lit the fog in eerie flashes, water roiled violently around the hull, and the crew moved with a fear-fueled precision that was both beautiful and terrifying. Hawk's pulse was steady, his mind was clear. His body was a conduit for experience, instinct, and raw determination. The threat was immediate, unknown, deadly, and he was ready. And somewhere in the back of his mind, Hawk knew the real danger. The unseen hand that tried to block him from boarding was still out there, watching, waiting. But now the Independence was awake. Now the crew followed the man they trusted with their lives. And as another streak of light emerged from the fog, Hawk's eyes narrowed, a calm fire burning beneath them. The first battle was just beginning, and the storm was far from over. The USS Independence rocked violently as explosions erupted on the water surrounding the vessel. Every blinding flash, every violent splash of seawater reverberated through the steel deck. Hawk moved like a shadow, issuing commands that cut through the chaos. Forward deck teams braced, missiles locked on, defensive shields raised, and the lieutenant's voice carried the rhythm of coordinated survival across the comms. The unknown vessels were faster than anything they had seen, moving with eerie precision, almost as if anticipating their every maneuver. Hawk's eyes scanned the horizon, narrowing on a shadow that moved differently from the rest. Not random, not probing, this one was deliberate, singular, calculating. A chill ran down his spine. He knew instinctively this wasn't just a test of skill. Someone or something was targeting him personally. Lieutenant, Hawk barked, voice cutting through the roar of engines and explosion, track the Delta 9 signature. It's moving independently. I want speed, angle, and trajectory now. The lieutenant's fingers flew across the controls, coordinating with radar and forward teams, his pulse racing. Aye, sir. Delta 9 tracking, vectors locked, estimated intercept in 32 seconds. Hawk's mind raced. He had anticipated many scenarios in his life, but this one carried a familiar echo, a shadow from a mission decades ago that had never fully faded. Memories flickered, a failed interception, a betrayal that had left him exposed in hostile waters, the searing clarity of realizing someone within the ranks had tried to manipulate the outcome. Hawk clenched his jaw. Could it be happening again? Chief Harlan, the Admiral's voice cut in, calm but edged with tension. Delta 9 isn't like the others. We've never seen anything like it. Experimental propulsion, advanced targeting. This is why you were recalled. They knew you'd be the variable they couldn't calculate. Hawk's eyes burned with recognition. He nodded slightly, jaw tight. I know, and they'll regret underestimating me. Forward deck, brace for intercept. Engage on my mark. The lieutenant swallowed hard. Sir, this is beyond anything we've trained for. Training doesn't save lives, Hawk said sharply, eyes never leaving the moving shadow. Instinct does, and experience. Pay attention or you'll be a statistic. The Delta 9 vessel shifted suddenly, weaving through the fog with impossible speed. Hawk calculated angles, velocity, and timing simultaneously. Forward deck lock Delta 9. Wait, fire. Missiles streaked through the fog, arcing with precision, as Delta 9 executed a sudden maneuver, narrowly avoiding direct hits. The Independence tilted sharply, the deck groaning under the strain. Crew members held on, bracing against the sudden force, their eyes wide as they witnessed the near-miraculous evasion. Hawk's mind raced further, piecing together patterns from years of experience. They're baiting us, trying to lure our forward teams into a trap. Don't take it. The lieutenant relayed his orders, voice steady despite shaking hands. Teams are holding. No engagement unless on your mark, sir. Suddenly, a familiar call came over the comms, not from the lieutenant, not from the admiral, but a voice Hawk hadn't heard in years. Cold, calculated, disturbingly calm. Harlan, I knew you'd come. Hawk's eyes narrowed. The voice belonged to Marcus Vale, a former Navy operative turned mercenary. He had vanished years ago after a covert operation went wrong, leaving Hawk exposed and questioning loyalties within the fleet. Hawk's jaw tightened. Vale was a ghost from the past, and now he had returned. Vale, Hawk growled, voice low and steady, controlling the tension that threatened to spiral. I should have known you'd be involved. You should have stayed retired, Vale replied, tone eerily composed. But some ghosts don't rest, do they? Hawk's pulse quickened, but his expression remained calm. We don't have time for your games. Move or be eliminated. Vale's laughter echoed through encrypted channels, sending a shiver down Hawk's spine. Oh, I plan to move, but only when it suits me. I've been waiting for this moment, Hawk. You've always been the obstacle, and now you're in my path again. The lieutenant froze, comprehension dawning. Sir, that voice who? Hawk's jaw clenched. Someone from my past, someone dangerous. Keep your eyes on Delta 9 and the other unknowns. Ignore the chatter for now. Survival comes first. The Delta 9 vessel shifted again, faster than any missile could intercept. Hawk issued a rapid sequence of commands. Defensive shields adjusted, countermeasures armed, speed and trajectory recalculated. The Independence responded like a living entity, moving as if anticipating every move before it happened. Brace for impact, Hawk barked, and the water exploded violently against the hull as Delta 9 fired a pulse weapon. Sparks cascaded across the deck. Crew members ducked instinctively, shields absorbing the brunt of the strike. Hawk's body tensed, every muscle coiled like a spring. The lieutenant's hands were steady now, voice confident despite fear. Shields holding, sir. Forward deck ready to counter. Hawk nodded sharply. Intercept now. Engage Delta 9 full power. Missiles fired, engines roared, water sprayed in violent arcs as the Independence countered Vale's vessel. The fog twisted violently, concealing further dangers. Hawk's mind remained razor-sharp, anticipating, calculating, commanding. Every crew member followed instinctively, trusting the man who had survived impossible missions before, and who now guided them through a storm they could barely comprehend. The Delta 9 vessel twisted in the water again, this time firing a rapid sequence of experimental projectiles. Hawk anticipated each one, commanding evasive maneuvers with precision. The ship rolled, tilted, and strafed through the waves like a predator evading another predator. Crew members were tested to the brink, muscles straining, hearts pounding, eyes sharp. Then came the voice again, cutting through encrypted channels. You always were good, Hawk, but not invincible. Hawk gritted his teeth, the weight of the past pressing against the present. He had faced Vale before. Vale had known every weakness, every instinct Hawk had relied on, but Hawk had changed. He had grown stronger, faster, smarter, and he would survive. Not today, Vale, Hawk muttered under his breath, eyes narrowing on the approaching vessel. Today, you learn you can't block what you can't understand. The Independence surged forward, engines at full power, missiles arcing, defensive systems firing, shields absorbing pulses. The battle was now personal, professional, and tactical, all at once. Hawk moved like a conductor, orchestrating a deadly symphony of defense and attack. The lieutenant, adrenaline coursing through him, realized the depth of Hawk's brilliance. He had never seen anyone coordinate chaos like this. Lives depended on precision, instinct, and courage, and Hawk embodied all three. The fog swirled, water churned, and Delta 9 twisted, accelerated, vanished momentarily in the mist, only to reappear in another angle of attack. Hawk anticipated, recalculated, countered. He was a storm contained within a human body, every decision a blade, every order a shield. And somewhere beyond the immediate chaos, Hawk knew the real threat. The unseen saboteur who tried to block him from boarding was still in play, manipulating, waiting. But Hawk was ready, always ready, and this time no one would stop him. The first true engagement was over, but the battle and the reckoning had only just begun. The USS Independence groaned under the relentless assault. Fog clung to the steel hull like a suffocating shroud, obscuring sightlines, twisting shadows into phantoms of danger. Explosions erupted around the ship, violent and sudden, each one rocking the deck, sending shudders through the crew. Hawk's boots hit the deck with a rhythm born of decades of experience, eyes scanning, calculating, anticipating. Every muscle was coiled, every nerve alert. The Delta 9 vessel loomed ahead, its silhouette barely visible through the mist. Hawk's instincts screamed. It wasn't just a threat, it was personal. Marcus Vale had orchestrated this entire assault, from the initial delay to the advanced vessels, to test Hawk's limits, or to eliminate him. "Forward deck," Hawk barked, voice carrying over the roar of engines and explosions. "Lock Delta 9 on full intercept. No hesitation, shields up, defensive measures on high alert." The lieutenant's fingers flew across the console, relaying orders to every section of the ship. Sweat ran down his temple, but his movements were precise, controlled, a reflection of Hawk's influence. The crew moved in synchrony, a single organism reacting to the chaos around them. "Missiles armed, sir," the forward deck leader reported, voice tight with tension. "Delta 9 is moving unpredictably, like it knows our every move." Hawk's jaw clenched. "Of course it does, Vale's controlling it. He knows my style, my calculations, my instincts, but I've learned since last time, I'm not the same man he faced before. We adapt, we survive." The first missiles streaked through the fog, arcing toward the target. Delta 9 twisted midair, evading each strike with near-impossible precision. Hawk's mind raced, calculating speed, angles, countermaneuvers, predicting the enemy's thought process as though he were inside Vale's head. "Brace for impact," Hawk shouted, anticipating another pulse weapon. Sparks exploded along the hull as shields absorbed the strike. Crew members ducked instinctively, adrenaline surging, hearts hammering. The fog seemed to swirl violently around them, hiding dangers, amplifying the tension, but Hawk's gaze never wavered. Then came the voice again, cutting through encrypted channels. Cold, calm, deliberate. "Impressive, Hawk, but you can't anticipate everything." Hawk's eyes narrowed. "Vale," he said through gritted teeth, "this ends today." A sudden movement to starboard caught Hawk's attention, a secondary Delta vessel approaching silently, faster than the first. Hawk adjusted instantly. "Lieutenant, Delta 10 inbound. Full defensive mode, intercept missiles at the ready." The lieutenant's hands flew over the controls, coordinating defensive shields and offensive countermeasures simultaneously. "Sir, multiple Delta vessels detected. This isn't a simple attack, it's a coordinated strike." "Then we coordinate better," Hawk said, calm, voice cutting through the tension like steel. "Forward deck, intercept on my mark. Hold formation, anticipate every move, and trust your instincts. The crew responded, their fear tempered by trust in Hawk. Explosions lit the fog in violent flashes, water roared against the hull, and the vessel rocked under the strain. Hawk's mind raced ahead, calculating trajectories, predicting enemy maneuvers, anticipating Vale's next move. Delta 9 pulsed forward, closing the distance. Hawk leaned over the console, inputting a daring maneuver he had only ever attempted once before, a calculated risk that relied on timing, instinct, and the crew's absolute precision. Full reverse thrusters, evasive angle 23, then rapid starboard pivot, he ordered. Lieutenant, relay to all decks. This is the only way to gain an opening. The ship groaned, water slamming against the hull, as the Independence twisted in the waves. Missiles fired, shields flared, and Delta 9 faltered slightly, its pilot miscalculating the speed of the Independence for the first time. Hawk's eyes gleamed with controlled intensity. Now he barked. Forward deck launched intercepts, precise, calculated, exploiting the slight misalignment in Delta 9's vector. Explosions rippled across the fog, illuminating the water in blinding flashes. Sparks cascaded along the deck as missiles detonated harmlessly in the mist. The vessel shuddered under the strain, but Hawk didn't flinch. Secondary vessels now, Hawk ordered. Engineer full thrust, forward deck, intercept Delta 10 and Delta 11 simultaneously. The lieutenant's voice rose above the chaos. Aye, sir, engaging Delta 10 and Delta 11. The crew executed flawlessly, missiles arcing, shields absorbing, the Independence moving like a single, breathing entity. Every sailor followed Hawk's commands as though instinct, eyes wide, muscles tense, hearts synchronized with the rhythm of survival. Then came the pulse weapon, more powerful, directed at the command center. Hawk anticipated, executing a precise maneuver, twisting the Independence's hull to absorb and deflect the blast. Sparks flew, instruments flickered, but the ship held. Delta 9 retreating, the radar tech shouted. Temporary disengagement, evasive patterns detected. Hawk's eyes narrowed. Temporary, it wasn't over. He knew Vale's mind too well. Retreat now meant regrouping for a more lethal strike. Good, Hawk muttered, but don't celebrate. They'll be back stronger, faster, smarter. The lieutenant looked at him, awe and fear mixed in his gaze. Sir, how do you? Hawk didn't answer. He was already scanning the horizon, calculating, anticipating. His mind was a storm contained, focused, precise. Prepare for boarding protocols, he finally said. If they push closer, we take the fight to them. I won't wait for them to strike again. The Admiral appeared at Hawk's side. You've turned the tide, he said, voice low but steady. We've survived the first wave thanks to you. Hawk's jaw tightened. We survived because the crew trusted me. Don't forget that. I don't do this alone. Suddenly, an alert rang out. Delta 9 was re-emerging, faster, armed with multiple new projectiles. Hawk's eyes burned. He could feel the shadow of Vale's presence, the orchestration behind every move. This wasn't just an attack, it was personal. Lieutenant, Hawk said, voice calm but commanding, coordinate with forward teams. We're going on the offensive. Prepare to intercept Delta 9 at maximum range. Shields at full, weapons primed. The lieutenant nodded, hands flying, voice steady despite the storm of chaos. Crew members braced, adrenaline coursing through veins, eyes locked on Hawk, trusting him completely. Hawk's eyes flicked briefly to the horizon, where the fog concealed the approaching Delta 9 vessel. He knew Vale was inside, manipulating, calculating, anticipating every move. And Hawk was ready, anticipating, countering, surviving. Forward deck, fire on my mark. 3, 2, 1 now, Hawk shouted. Missiles streaked forward with deadly precision, intercepts launched, shields flared, and the Delta 9 vessel staggered under the onslaught. Water exploded violently, fog illuminated in brilliant flashes, and for the first time, Vale's control faltered. Hawk didn't relent. Press the advantage, keep pressure. Forward deck, Delta 9 is vulnerable. The crew moved in perfect synchrony, guided by Hawk's instincts. Every missile, every countermeasure, every maneuver executed flawlessly. Sparks and water erupted around them, fog twisting, shadows flickering, but the Independence held. And somewhere beyond the chaos, Hawk knew the final confrontation was coming, the moment when he would face Vale directly, when experience, instinct, and determination would collide with betrayal, precision, and lethal skill. The storm had reached its peak. The first battle had been survived, but the real reckoning was about to begin. Hawk's eyes narrowed. Let's finish this. USS Independence sliced through the mist like a blade through steel, engines roaring, hull groaning, every sailor on edge. Hawk's eyes never left the horizon where Delta 9 reappeared, cutting through the fog with deadly precision. This was it, the final engagement. The culmination of decades of experience, of instincts honed under fire, of battles won and lives lost. Every nerve in Hawk's body was alive with tension, every calculation screaming urgency. "Forward deck," Hawk commanded, voice low but carrying across the ship. "Intercept Delta 9 at maximum range. Shields full, weapons primed. This ends now." The lieutenant's fingers flew across the console, issuing orders to the crew with precision. "Sir, Delta 9 is armed with multiple experimental weapons. This is it, the main strike." Hawk's jaw tightened. "I've survived worse. Trust your training and trust me. Eyes sharp, anticipate, react, and above all, don't hesitate." The fog thickened, shadows twisting around the vessel like living predators. Hawk's eyes scanned, predicting the movement of Delta 9 as if he could see into Vale's mind. Marcus Vale, the ghost from his past, the man responsible for the earlier betrayal, the one who had tried to manipulate the mission from the shadows, was inside that vessel. Hawk felt the cold thrill of confrontation settle deep in his chest. "Brace for impact," Hawk barked. The water erupted as Delta 9 fired a pulse weapon directly at the Independence's hull. Sparks flew across the deck, alarms blared, but Hawk's commands guided the crew through the chaos. Shields absorbed the impact, engines adjusted, missiles launched, and the fog exploded in flashes of light and energy. The lieutenant's voice was steady now, adrenaline tempered by respect. "Shields holding, sir. Delta 9's maneuvers are erratic but calculable." "Good," Hawk replied. "Keep pressure. Maintain offensive trajectory. Delta 9 will falter if we force it into predictable patterns." The vessel twisted, weaving unpredictably through the fog. Hawk's hands moved with precision over the controls, orchestrating evasive maneuvers and counterattacks simultaneously. He barked orders with the confidence of a man who had faced death countless times and emerged unbroken. Then came the voice, cold and deliberate, cutting through encrypted channels. "Hawk, I've been waiting for this moment. You've changed, but so have I." Hawk's eyes narrowed. "Vale, you've gambled too long. This ends today." The Delta 9 vessel surged forward, firing multiple projectiles in rapid succession. Hawk anticipated the trajectory, calculating angles, speed, and timing simultaneously. "Forward deck, fire intercepts. Engineer, maintain full thrust. All systems, ready." Explosions rippled across the water, violent arcs of energy and sparks illuminating the fog. The crew ducked instinctively, bracing against the sudden jolts, hearts racing, adrenaline pumping. Hawk's mind was razor-sharp, every decision precise, every movement calculated. He had faced impossible odds before, but this, with Vale orchestrating the attack personally, was unlike anything he had encountered. A sudden flash of insight struck Hawk. Vale was relying on psychological manipulation, testing his reactions, predicting his instincts. Hawk smirked slightly. "Let him. Lieutenant, adjust Delta 9's predicted path. Lead them into our trap. Full countermeasures." The lieutenant's hands flew across the controls. "Aye, sir. Adjusting course now." The Independence twisted violently, the hull groaning under the maneuver. Delta IX's path intersected with a carefully calculated intercept zone. Hawk held his breath, eyes locked, muscles coiled like a spring. The crew braced. Missiles fired in a synchronized arc, countermeasures flaring across the fog, and the water exploded in violent bursts of light and energy. Delta IX faltered, its trajectory compromised, propulsion overcorrecting. Hawk's mind raced with opportunity. Forward deck, secondary intercepts, don't hold back. The crew executed flawlessly, missiles striking Delta IX with precision. Sparks cascaded in brilliant flashes as the vessel rocked under the assault. Hawk's eyes burned with controlled intensity. He had predicted Vale's every move, anticipated his tactics, and now had the upper hand. Then the fog parted slightly, revealing the silhouette of Delta IX, smoking, struggling, vulnerable. Hawk's pulse quickened, not with fear, but with the certainty of victory within reach. "Prepare boarding protocols," Hawk said, voice calm but commanding. "We take this fight directly to him. No mistakes. Move fast, move precise." The lieutenant relayed the orders, voice tight but steady. Crew members braced for action, adrenaline surging, hearts pounding. The Independence surged forward, closing the gap. Hawk's mind was razor-sharp, calculating every angle, every risk. Inside Delta IX, Vale's eyes flicked across the console, realization dawning. He had underestimated Hawk, not just his skill but his experience, his instinct, his leadership. His face hardened. "So, he's still the obstacle," Vale muttered. The boarding maneuver was executed flawlessly. Hawk led the team across the fog-laden water, every step calculated, every movement precise. Crew members followed, trusting the man who had survived impossible missions before, who had guided them through the storm, who now led them directly into the lion's den. Delta IX's interior was a maze of technology, pulsating lights, and humming energy. Vale appeared at the control station, smirking, but Hawk's presence filled the room with undeniable authority. "Vale," Hawk said, voice low but deadly, "it ends here, no more games." Vale's smirk widened. "I've been waiting for this moment, Hawk. You've changed, but can you survive the past catching up?" Hawk's eyes narrowed. "I've survived worse. Today it's you who loses." The two men clashed, not just physically but mentally, decades of experience and instinct against raw cunning and calculated malice. Hawk's every move was precise, anticipating Vale's strikes, exploiting his overconfidence. Crew members secured Delta IX, neutralized remaining defenses, but Hawk's focus never wavered. Finally, with a calculated maneuver, Hawk disarmed Vale, neutralizing the vessel's controls. Delta IX shuddered violently as it lost power, smoke curling from its propulsion systems. Vale's smirk faltered, replaced with grudging respect. "You adapted," Vale muttered, voice low, almost defeated. Hawk's expression was calm, relentless. "You underestimated me. Never again." Outside, the fog began to lift. The sun pierced through in slivers, illuminating the Independence, still intact, still moving, still alive. The crew erupted in subdued cheers, adrenaline still surging, fear slowly giving way to relief. The lieutenant approached Hawk, eyes wide with awe. "Sir, that was incredible. We survived." Hawk's jaw softened slightly. "We survived because we worked together, because we trusted each other, and because no one underestimates the Independence or its crew." The Admiral appeared on the deck, face stern but proud. "Harlan, your actions today saved lives. The fleet owes you and this ship its gratitude." Hawk nodded, but his eyes remained on the foggy horizon. "It's never over. Someone tried to block me from boarding. That's what brought this all to the surface. Whoever it was, we'll find them." The lieutenant swallowed hard, realization dawning. So, this wasn't just a random attack. "No," Hawk said, voice low but steady. "It was orchestrated, planned, tested, but we adapted, and we survived." The sun broke fully through the fog now, light cascading across the deck. Crew members moved with exhausted precision, checking systems, tending minor damages, and still in awe of Hawk's presence. Hawk surveyed the Independence, the crew, the horizon. He had faced betrayal, sabotage, and death, and emerged unbroken. And as the waves calmed and the fog began to dissipate, Hawk finally allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The storm had passed. The threat had been neutralized. Vale had been defeated, and the Independence had survived, stronger for the trial it had endured. Yet Hawk knew, deep in his bones, that vigilance was never optional. There were always shadows, always threats, always challenges waiting beyond the horizon. But as long as he stood on the deck of the Independence, with crew and lieutenant by his side, he would meet them, and he would prevail. The Admiral approached one final time. "Harlan, thank you. Your presence was the difference." Hawk's gaze met the Admiral, calm, resolute. "Just doing my duty, sir, and making sure no one underestimates this ship or the people on it again." The crew cheered quietly, exhaustion and relief mingling in the foggy dawn. Hawk's eyes swept over them, every sailor a reminder of why he fought, why he endured, why he returned when someone had tried to block him. The USS Independence moved forward, slicing through the water, a symbol of resilience, courage, and unbreakable resolve. And Hawk, standing tall on the deck, knew this was only one battle in a lifetime of service, but one that would be remembered. The horizon was clear now, but Hawk's eyes never left it completely. The storm may have passed, but the sea always whispered of the next challenge, and Hawk would be ready.